everyone, my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and filmed live every Sunday night here at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City.
And I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon. Thanks for joining us on a hot, humid summer day. A little, almost too hot for the beaches. Our guest and I were talking about a little before the show. Dave Rosenblatt from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Dave, thanks for being here. Appreciate you coming on a Sunday night.
Thanks,
very much.
And Dave's
Welcome aboard.
Ventnor resident and lifelong shore resident. And Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career and what brought you here.
Sure. Well, I was born in Atlantic City. We lived on a house on Delancey Place, fourth generation in the house at the same time. We lived in Margate for a while and then moved to Ventnor, where we lived for, well, since I was 5 years old. Went to Rutgers College of Agriculture and Environmental Science after graduating from Atlantic City High School, of course, and went to work for DEP. I've been there for 40 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah, in all different capacities. But right now I'm Assistant Commissioner for Climate and Flood Resilience, and I'm the state's first Chief Resilience Officer.
And we appreciate you being here. First-time guest, kind of give us a state and a different perspective from a person who's been at it a very long time. So we look forward to a great conversation with you.
Good.
Now, since you grew up here, has dealing with coastal issues and, deciding to work in that field always been an interest of yours?
Oh, sure. I spent my entire childhood on the beach, and I was attracted to marine ecology issues, and that's what I took up at Rutgers.
I always ask, was it a particular event along the shore? Like, what's your most, as someone who's been here his whole life, what's your most memorable, storm or weather event that really impacted, whether it be you or your property or your community, the most significantly?
The 62 storm.
62 storm.
Yeah.
Which wasn't a hurricane. We always stress that was a nor'easter.
It was a dramatic nor'easter.
Yep.
I can remember pieces of the boardwalk washing up on Baltimore Avenue and floating down in front of our house. I remember going to the beach and seeing part of the boardwalk destroyed. The sand disappeared. There was a drop off of 10 feet from the bulkhead down to the sand level. So yeah, I do remember that. I can't say that was part of my psyche, but I do remember it.
Now, what's the state, like the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, what's their along interest along the shore? What's you guys' goal? That was a pretty broad question.
That's a big question.
What are your main focuses along the Jersey Shore? Especially today, especially post-Sandy.
Okay, so two, flooding and storm damage reduction from wave action. Post-Sandy, we came in and worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to get from Cape May to Sandy Hook, beaches expanded and dunes where the design called for them to be.
Yep.
We work with the Army Corps a lot. They're a great partner. They bring a lot of resources. They pick up 65% of the construction costs, and they have a tremendous amount of resources. So when Sandy occurred and in the aftermath, we got busy either redoing the beaches that we've already built or building beaches that we had not been building before. It was a big event in the way the state looks at shore protection.
And it's a job that's never done. Kind of like the U.S. mail, right? It's never done because you're getting storms every year. Nor'easters, hurricanes, just nature eating at our beaches. So your job, your work is never done.
It never is done. It's a constant cycle. It's like painting the Ben Franklin Bridge. You get done to one end and you have to come back and start over again. Beaches are the same way. They're meant to disappear during storms. They take the brunt of the wave action. Sand moves. Sometimes it moves just offshore to a sandbar. Sometimes it goes further out. When it's only in a sandbar, it comes back. You'll see that during the summer. Southwest winds bring the sand back in this area. But it is the soft construction that we do with beach replenishments is meant to keep recurring.
Now, for the more major construction projects, what is the timeline and what's typically involved with getting a project approved and started?
So I'll continue with our relationship with the Army Corps of Engineers, because that's where we do the most amount of work along the shorefront. Right after Sandy, we turned to designs and plans that had been virtually completed dozens of years prior to Sandy occurring. After the beaches had not been built for one reason or another, there was no money, there wasn't a community will to have the beaches built, particularly up in North Jersey, and you saw it here too, Margate and Longport. But post Sandy, the governor stepped in and said, "I want all these beaches rebuilt." So we were pulling these plans off the shelves in some cases and using them. Now, a great amount of work goes into projects, even the simple ones like beach replenishments, and they are simple as far as civil works projects go. You're putting sand on top of sand. Right. It should not be that difficult. But even those took a lot of time in development, community interaction, environmental review, and then finally you have to go into the appropriation process in Congress, and then finally you get to construction.
Yep.
And it could take 10 years for some of these things to get to construction. Other projects could take a little longer, some take 5 years. But it does take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and it's one of the reasons why we like working with the Army Corps. Now, we've done big projects ourselves. We've done $25 million beach replenishment projects in South Jersey, in South City, and Stone Harbor, and so we're used to large projects. But post Sandy, that was a big event. The work that we did was just continuous, and we're just wrapping it up now in Point Pleasant.
Now we on this show we get asked a lot of questions, and sometimes our guests bring it up. You know, how is our changing climate change things along the Jersey Shore? So what we try to do is, because for whatever reason climate change can be a controversial issue, we kind of stick with, all right, what are the changes we've seen? Forget about the causes of it or who's responsible or what's going to happen in the future. We have seen changes in, whether it be the frequency of storms or the level of the tides, or what changes have you seen and what complications have those changes presented to you?
So I think it's hard to attribute any one storm to climate change.
Yeah, that's one thing as a meteorologist, we always say weather is not climate. Right. Climate is 100 years, weather's a day.
Weather events over an extended period of time will determine your climate.
Exactly.
I would start this way by saying, prior to 2004, when we did the Atlantic City Beach and the Ventnor Beach, there was not a lot of beach left, and high tides were coming up to the bulkhead. Now that we've done the replenishments there several times, I think a lot of people forget just how exposed we were. People don't remember the water coming up that far at high tide. So people's perception is a little bit off. People say, hey, we're better off than we were. Well, we spent a lot of time and work getting us to that point.
Yeah, they don't see the work that goes in, all those dozens of projects, and they don't necessarily see that year to year.
But what I think people are seeing the most impact is the bayfront. Take a simple occurrence on West End Avenue here, off of Black Horse Pike, near Vagabond.
Yep.
You can't make that right-hand turn at extreme high tides. Even sometimes normal high tides, the water's coming into the street and blocking the cars. So it's those small things that I think are giving you a preview of what could happen or probably will happen in the future.
And as a meteorologist, I know they issue coastal flood advisories for tidal flooding. We actually had to raise the threshold to trigger one, because otherwise we'd be under one, like more often than we weren't. So they were kind of getting advisory fatigue because of the frequency. Like you said, that those minor events are happening a lot more often.
And some communities like Seattle City have been very active in doing things like raising roads.
Yep.
That's the first thing that's going to happen, especially along the evacuation routes. People notice the normal high tides are coming up higher than they used to, and it's causing them issues. Sometimes you can't get out of your house. Sometimes you can't get back into your house. Right now they're called nuisance. It's called nuisance flooding, but it's nuisance flooding because it happens twice a month or 3 times a month. But when it happens every day, well, that's sea level rise most likely.
But yeah, it becomes everyday flooding. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, besides you mentioned raising roads, what are some other things that you think municipalities should be looking to do or focusing on in order to make us more ready for a coastal event?
So I always think back to how much, again, to post-Sandy, how many, and I'm talking like weeks and months after Sandy, there was tremendous involvement by federal government. The congressman in New Jersey brought a lot of money into the state through the Army Corps of Engineers, through FEMA, and HUD. But I always ask, what would have happened if there wasn't that federal commitment to restoring New Jersey back to where it was, and maybe even a little bit better in preparation for future flooding? So I think that municipalities have to start preparing themselves for what they want to do in the future. That means planning, engineering, figuring out the finances of doing some of these projects, as if there's not necessarily going to be federal and state dollars coming, because we don't know what's in the future regarding those things. So that's the type of planning municipalities have to do, resilience planning. Now, we are helping municipalities in resilience planning. We have a project called the Frames Project up in North Jersey along the Shrewsbury and Navasang. We have Resilience NJ. We're partnering with 4 groups of municipalities throughout the state, providing them with engineering firms to help them do designs. So we want to use those as models that other communities can use to get going on the road.
Now, here's a question. This kind of ties in with what's saying here. Virginia Gardinsky, Virginia, nice to have you on. And I know I've heard 30, 40, 50, 60 years, lots of studies out there. She says, do you believe, as some have said, that the shore only has X number of years before is everything underwater? We're telling communities to be resilient. And, I mean, is this something that, it is worth fighting? We can be resilient and fight all this with planning, with lots of thought and and money and operations to fight back what's happening, or is it a futile effort? I don't think we'd be here if it was a futile effort, right?
I don't think it's futile. I mean, everything we do, everything along the coast, you have to think of as an investment. You want a return on your investment. Everybody does, whether it's real estate, business, tourism. Sea level rise is going to occur. How much is going to occur depends on what we do on the other side of the coin, which is pollution prevention, reducing carbon dioxide emissions throughout the world. But we can't control all of that. So we have to prepare for becoming more resilient. Now, sea level rise will continue to occur on a straight line for a while. There's predictions that you'll see exponential sea level rise after a certain year, like 2050, 2040. We're modeling predictions. We have a lot of faith in those modeling predictions. So we'll look at a range of sea level rise, 2 feet to 8 feet, depending on circumstances.
And I always say, and I'll use my meteorology background too, they're models and they're probably pretty good, but weather predictions one day off can be wrong. So when you're asking, 40 years, that's why there's such a range. That's why, it could be 1 foot, it could be 6 feet. It is a huge range because weather and, I guess, climate prediction is inherently uncertain.
So a lot of the predictions are based on probabilities. Some, the low probability estimates for sea level rise, high probability may not be as high as an end point. You might, low probabilities may be way up on the curve, but we really have to start preparing for all of the probabilities.
Right.
If it's low cost planning, low cost activities like doing things like not building in flood prone areas, that's a plus. If it means building your home to slightly higher than FEMA requirements, yes, do that too. Not high cost. But when you get into high cost projects and activities, like Army Corps projects that could cost $7 billion or $3 billion, as some of their proposals will cost, then you have to really have an idea of what you're talking about. And we'll see. We'll go and check. We'll check over the course of time how well those predictions are playing out.
Right.
Now, these activities and projects, does the community ever get involved, like residents and visitors, or is it mostly, local officials or state government?
This is going to require the community to get involved. That's why we in the Corps have spent so much time having public events, bringing residents in to hear what we're doing. We need to do a lot more of that. They need to understand the science that we're working with. I think that's critical. They have to understand the probabilities of sea level rise. So they understand our language and we understand their thinking. As a resident, I understand very well. Sometimes we talk in a different language. And we have to make our case to the residents who are going to support what their elected officials want to do, even though it's going to cost money and some of the activities may not be popular, but that's what it's going to take. A lot of community involvement, and we have to prepare people better than we ever have for the activities that are going to come.
Now, Sandy taught us a lot. A lot of stuff has changed in Sandy. What do you think is like a typical, let's say, Ventnor or any Jersey Shore town? And I know the answer differs town to town, but what do you think our biggest vulnerability still is? Like what haven't we corrected yet? What's leaving us most vulnerable from a Sandy-like storm or something worse? I mean, I know so much is improved.
Or Achilles heel.
Yeah, I guess what's our Achilles heel?
Our Achilles heel right now is the back bays. The back bays. The department and the Corps came in and replenished the beaches, built dunes where they were designed. But the back bays are largely exposed. I would also say that the stormwater systems that we have were built for a certain level of bay water. And now we're finding that, you see the streets in Margate, and Amherst Avenue, or Jerome Avenue, after heavy rains, the water can't get out because the bay levels are so high at high tide. So that's our biggest vulnerability.
I mean, is there a way to, dunes and beach replenishment tackles the ocean side? What tackles the bay side?
So we're working on that. Again, there's a back bay feasibility study that the Army Corps is preparing. It's a multi-year feasibility study that will result in proposals. You'll see a lot of proposals for entire areas to have all the homes elevated. Some proposals will call for perimeter projects, which are building of higher bulkheads, seawalls. And then there's the really costly option of putting surge barriers across any major inlets.
I know there was an article in the press about the Great Egg Harbor Bay. I mean, I know it's just a proposal or a possibility, but those type of things. Right?
So those are the $5 to $7 billion projects that are going to have maintenance costs of $100 million a year. They don't really address sea level rise. The surge gates don't address sea level rise. they address storms. So normal, as sea level rises over the decades, the gates are not going to be as effective. They are for surge events.
So they help you with the big one. They don't help you with the 100 small ones you have in a year or whatnot, right?
Right.
So these projects on the bay, do you think that they would save the community money in the long run, like some of the smaller scale projects?
They're designed to do that. Every project that the Corps builds will have to go through a cost-benefit analysis. So the damages that are projected to be incurred have to be have to offset the cost of the project. There's a ratio where the cost of benefit has to be at 1.0, and so there is a critical point where the damages could far exceed the cost of the project, and it looks like a very viable project. But then you look at the entire cost and you say, that's really expensive, particularly for those projects that have ongoing maintenance costs of $100 million a year. That's tough.
Where would that money come from? I mean,
well, that's a question. That's a question. But the most practical approach right now is for us to continue on the path of home elevations. Then we have to plan what we're going to do around those home elevations, the elevating of roads, of critical infrastructure, of all those emergency structures like firehouses and so on. So there's a lot of work to do.
And those big, I'm interested. I thought the storm surge barrier was an interesting read. Whether it's feasible or cost effective or not. I grew up in Rhode Island on Narragansett Bay, and they built the hurricane barrier at the 38 hurricane there, which protects one city, downtown Providence. I would imagine Jersey with how many inlets and estuaries, and you're talking just a huge, colossal number for safely blocking off anything significant that can fill.
The greatest attribute of our state, our waterways, is our biggest weakness.
Yep, absolutely. What about the importance of to deal with this at all, like salt marshes and living shorelines and outside of beaches and dunes and back bays? What about the natural coast?
So everything we've been talking about so far has been about us, and we haven't talked about the natural ecosystem that's out there. And yes, as sea level rise, marshes will disappear. Unless we help, we can enhance wetlands by doing thin layering of sediments and help the growth. We can do projects to help erosion of wetlands. Yes, we need to do all of that, and sometimes it's a mutual benefit. We help the wetlands, and good wetlands will absorb some water and also stop some wave action.
If you're watching live on Facebook, you can comment or ask us questions. I'm not sure, Dan, do we have any comments?
Nothing else. Virginia's question, notwithstanding. She asked the second question, which you asked, is there anything residents themselves can do to help? So Virginia, here are great questions. So thank you for watching. Lucy, Kristen, nice to have you guys on as well on a Sunday. We just had Barry hit the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of rain. We are into hurricane season now. We always say ours is peaking in August and September. Sandy taught us it goes to November for a reason. And preparation is something, you guys are doing year-round, and residents should as well, right?
Yes. The residents should really start to educate themselves about the details of climate change. Follow New Jersey's DEP's website.
Yeah, feel free to give that out. Like, how can they self-educate? Like, in addition to the forums or when you guys hold public events, how can they on their phones or online, educate themselves a little bit?
There's a website run by our State Police Office of Emergency Management called ready.nj.gov that I would encourage people to go to. It gives you a good background of all the hazards that we that we are facing. It's the hazard mitigation plan, actually. You can go to NJDEP's website and cruise through all the layers that are in there. There's a lot of information about flooding. That's where I would start, and then I would say start attending municipal government meetings. That's important. Be involved there. Hear what they have to tell you. Every once in a while, we'll be out there. We'll hold public meetings on projects or strategies that we're developing. Just get immersed in this stuff. That would be my recommendation to residents.
Now, are the strategies that you sort of mentioned tonight online that people could look into, or are they not really public until they are approved?
No. Also, you can go to the Army Corps of Engineers website, go to the Philadelphia District, and they list all the projects and all the studies that they're currently working on. DEP's Coastal Engineering website will have projects that we're building, and yes, that's one way to become informed.
And then I guess, we handled the back bays, we handled the beaches, handled the salt marshes in between. My final question, and I guess the last coastal area of the state, the disappearing villages along Delaware Bay. How involved is the state DEP? I know some of them have just been, we're encouraging people to, all right, nature's taking over this one, all right, so we're going to evacuate Seabreeze, and Thompson's Beach was lost. I think Fortescue's still the big one down there. How involved are you guys with Delaware Bay, and is the strategy the same or different as along the ocean?
I think we have to look at all the assets of the community going forward into the future. We have to assess the vulnerabilities and the financial resources available. We have to look at everything. And it's not just South Jersey, it's also up in the metro area. We're working on projects in Hoboken and the Meadowlands. Those people get flooded too. They got hit worse. They got hit worse in the Meadowlands than we did down here in South Jersey during Sandy.
Okay. Let's see. Vicky hit me a quick question. I guess it's more of a weather question. When will the remnants of Barry reach our area, and is severe weather or flooding expected? Vicky, it's not a given that Barry's remnants reach our area. It'll be in a much weaker form. Our best chance for rain this week is late Thursday and Thursday night. You really won't be able to tell they're Barry's remnants unless we say, hey, these are Barry's remnants, but there are some showers and thunderstorms in the forecast. That's the only real rain this week. Otherwise, it's the hot weather, especially Friday, Saturday, some very hot weather on the way, probably the hottest of the year. So Barry will be in a much weakened form if and when it ever gets here. But appreciate the question, Vicky.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us some insight on the projects and things that we are already seeing and what we might see in the future. We do want to present you with an Irish Pub t-shirt as our guest.
Thank you.
And Dave Rosenblatt from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has been our guest this week. Every Sunday night, 7 p.m. here at the Irish Pub, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. And come on down, have some food, have some drink, watch the show online, and of course they're archived online as well. Dave, after you drink your water, go ahead.
Very good.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. We'll see you back here next Sunday, 7 p.m. Have a good week, guys.